as appropriate and asking Donna and Dave to answer them when they seem to be appropriate. So please make sure that you send those questions in through either the chat or the questions section of your dashboard. Having said that, I'd like to thank Donna Doherty and David Walsh for offering their time, and they've spent a great deal of time working on this presentation and making sure that it meets the needs of the folks on the phone, and I really appreciate both of their time. They're both are very experienced in this field. I'm not going to offer their introductions. They will do that for us, and thank you, Donna.
Okay. Hi, this is Donna Doherty, and welcome today. I'm the Director of Legal Services for the Elderly in Queens, which is a legal services office that represents people 60 and older who are at risk. And so we do have a foreclosure prevention program since the mid-90s, and given the economic crisis, have expanded that since 2008. One of the things we do is try to counsel people about what are their best options, including reverse mortgage. So I'm very happy to be here today.
And I'm Dave Walsh. I'm a principal in Home Checks. Home Checks is a company that was formed in 1997. We're based in Rochester, New York, although we service New York State and Connecticut. And we do nothing but federally insured reverse mortgage loans for senior homeowners. In that regard, we've worked with quite a number of the folks on the webinar today, or if not them directly, with their offices. Our topic today, how a reverse mortgage can assist you folks in your work. We looked at the list of attendees today, and we see a lot of folks from the legal community, but we also see almost an equal number of folks from the general senior service agencies. And so our comments today will try to be relevant to both types of attendees. Donna and I are going to take you through the mechanics of reverse mortgage, and we're going to do this relatively quick because you can read what's on the screens, and we're pretty much just going to be covering that information. Along the way, while we do that, we're going to try to dispel a lot of the myths that have grown up regarding the program. Then we're going to look at some cases, actual cases, closed reverse cases where we've used a reverse mortgage to assist the senior, working with, again, the legal community. And Donna's going to take you through some particular legal matters and cases that have arisen regarding the program. Let's start. What is a reverse mortgage? First of all, it's a federally insured program. It's run by the Federal Housing Administration. So just like all FHA mortgages, the government's assuring that anybody that's entering the program will get all the benefits to which they're entitled. A reverse mortgage, first of all, is a mortgage. It's not a grant. It's not just a help program. It's a mortgage, a financial obligation with unique financial characteristics. The most obvious one being is that people that get a reverse mortgage have no required monthly payment for as long as they live in the house. They can be in the program 30 years. It doesn't matter. No repayments required for as long as they continue to live in the home, or if it's a spousal situation, as long as at least one of them continues to live in the home. The idea here is pretty simple. So many seniors have a great deal of their worth tied up in their equity in their home, and the idea is to tap that equity to support and maintain their lifestyles. So how does it work? A loan with no monthly repayment requirement. That being said, can you repay on a reverse mortgage? Absolutely. You can repay in full and part at any time. Do people do that? Sure. Their situation changes. They get married. They move. Any number of reasons can trigger a repayment. Again, no penalty. We already mentioned there's no repayment required on a monthly basis for as long as they continue to live in the home. The fourth bullet's probably the most important there. We say that repayment will never exceed the home value. This is a non-recourse loan. If somebody enters into this when they're 62 and literally lived in their house for 30 years to 92 and never made a repayment, they very well could owe more than the value of the home between the money they borrowed and the interest on it. Doesn't matter. Okay, if you owe more than the value of the home, you pay back the lower amount. The value of the of the home or the loan balance at that time. So no money left at the end, you don't worry about it. The reverse is true, however. If there's equity left, it belongs to the owner or the heirs. So how much money can they get? Well, it's a function of three things. Their age, older you are, the better it is. Their property value, not surprisingly, the greater the value of the property, the more they can get. And the program they pick, because there's different interest rates associated with the various programs. Those three variables go into a predetermined formula, and that determines how much money is made available to the homeowner. Typically, that runs between 1/2 and 2/3 of their property value. Good. Eligibility, got to be at least 62. The first question comes up: what if we have somebody 62 and 58? Well, that doesn't work. All homeowners have to be at least 62 at the time of application. They have to occupy the home as their primary residence. Last time we did this, one of the questions came up down from a lot of the New York City-based area people was, can you do cooperatives? At the moment, I'm afraid to say that is not the case. And frankly, the FHA is not even pursuing the co-ops at this moment. So 1 to 4 family properties and FHA-approved condominiums. If there are required repairs, typically they can be done after closing. The last bullet, sufficient equity. We'll talk a lot about this. A lot of the cases we work with the legal community are situations where people are underwater or we cannot generate enough money from the reverse mortgage to pay off the full balance. So that's something we have to be able to retire any existing first mortgage loan. We'll talk about some of the clever ways we've done that in the past. Okay, so far, everybody? Okay. Let's see, we're going to go to miss 1 there. Let's see. Whoop, we went the wrong way on our screen there.
Oh.
Let's see. Should be the next one.
Yeah, that's it. No?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You are correct. If we could go back a screen, you're fine. I got ahead of my notes. I apologize to everybody on the conference call here today. One of the real important things to realize about this program, one of the problems that senior homeowners have is that they tend to be on reduced fixed incomes, and they are not quite as creditworthy as perhaps they were when they were working and maintaining a full-time job. So the way the reverse mortgage works now is not income-based. It does not matter what your assets are, and your credit score doesn't matter. How much you get for a reverse mortgage depends on your home value and your age. This will probably change. Matter of fact, it will change a little bit before the summer is out. The FHA would like to root out, frankly, the people that have really been they have not really met their obligations in regard to taxes and insurance. And we think that there's going to be some rules published by the FHA before the summer's out, putting additional requirements on in terms of probably some type of escrow reserve requirement for people that have had tax and insurance problems. They want to make sure of that, and they want to make sure that the income is sufficient to at least meet those obligations. So we aren't anticipating major changes, but we do anticipate some changes in that regard before the summer is out.
There's one question, Dave, about the repayment obligations and how that works. So here's the question. The client is age 62. They live in a home until they're age 92. Mm-hmm. Is the repayment amount the value of the home at age 62 or the value of the home at age 92?
Terrific question, and the answer is the value of the home at 92. Okay? Now, that's an interesting question because, like, if we go back 5 or 6 years ago, particularly in the metro area, property values were continuing to go up rapidly. Then all of a sudden we had the collapse that we all went through there in the last few years, and that $400,000 property was worth $300,000. Okay, that risk is transferred to the FHA. The property goes down in value. That's the FHA's problem, and not the homeowners. That being said, so an appraisal of the property will be appraised at 92 in this example, and that's how the calculation will be based, what the property is worth at that point vis-a-vis the loan balance. Thank you for that question. We're going to keep going through some basics, but we're also going to start talking about some of the myths that have come up. First one is, I'm going to lose my house. So I get the money, but I have to transfer my property to the lender. That's absolutely not true. It's no different than a regular mortgage. You own the home subject to the mortgage. That being said, Donna has a comment you'd like to
Yes, the next is, just like a regular mortgage, the borrower has to pay property taxes, insurance, water, and you have to keep the house up. Now, the difference is in a regular forward mortgage, usually these amounts are escrowed and are part of what the person is paying in their monthly payment. Right now, with a reverse mortgage, it is the obligation on the homeowner to make sure that these are kept up. And so one of the things I recommend to people when I'm sitting down and counseling them is we have to figure out a way that this is paid on a regular basis, because especially with my older clients, sometimes they forget, and they forget to pay the taxes, they forget to pay the insurance. This can be a problem because that can be a triggering event for calling in the loan, especially for taxes. But it is no different than what would be required in a regular mortgage. Now, again, as Dave mentioned, this may change with FHA rule changes if they require some escrowing. One of the last things I said is, again, you have to sit down and financially counsel your clients to make sure that they understand this. Even though there will be required HUD counseling before any loan closes, we do a much more in-depth counseling with our clients.
Great. One nice thing is that to the extent people get rid of a principal and interest payment, the ability to make tax and insurance obligations should become that much easier. Second myth. Oh, gee, if I get this, I'm going to have to pay taxes on the money, or I'm going to get some senior-based benefits now, and they're going to be disrupted. Donna's going to again talk about this. The answer is that reverse mortgage proceeds are not taxable. You're drawing on your own asset, which is the equity in your home, and done correctly, you won't disturb the benefits. But again, Donna will.
Yeah, so it is not going to affect if you have property tax exemptions under state. New York State has particular exemptions, or their Social Security. What you do have to watch out for, however, is if you have clients that are on public benefits, and I have clients that are on Medicaid, receiving home care or SSI, food stamps, they shouldn't be affected by a reverse mortgage, but we, in order to make sure that there is no disruption in benefits, we advise to, before the closing, to contact an elder lawyer, and these do not need to be private elder lawyers. The legal services community has many free services regarding benefits under SSI and Medicaid, and they can advise clients as to how to make sure that this is a smooth transition, because what you don't want is a caseworker saying, oh, you've converted your home to cash, and somehow counting that as either an asset or monthly income. To avoid that, you just want to make sure that's set up ahead of time.
Exactly. Myth 3, spouse dies, the reverse mortgage will come due. That's absolutely not true. A reverse mortgage for a couple remains in place for as long as at least one owner continues to live in the home. And again, like we mentioned earlier, no matter how long that may be. And again, that's the idea, because if we have a couple, the last thing we wanted to do if a spouse passes away is to disrupt the life of the remaining spouse.
Now,
yeah,
stated down here, this doesn't apply to a spouse who may not be on the title or who may be non-borrowing. And we're going to talk about this later. This issue regarding non-borrowing spouses is being litigated, as some of you may know, under the Bennett case out of the D.C. Circuit by AARP, but we're going to talk about that later. But otherwise, as Dave says, that if it's a borrowing spouse, as long as one of them is there, then you're protected.
Next slide, we say that sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to have a bill at the end, or my family's going to have a bill at the end, or my spouse is going to have a bill at the end. Again, we've touched on this, that no one would ever, you'll never have a bill at the end of the program. If there's equity left, it belongs to the owner or the owner's heirs. If there's no money left, you can walk away from the transaction. You can transfer the house to the FHA and say, there's no equity here, here's the house, and we're done. There'll be no deficiency judgment. Reverse mortgages are expensive. Well, I have several comments in this regard. First of all, it is a mortgage, so you don't do this for short-term borrowing. We'll get the case where somebody say, we're here for the next 2 years and we're moving to Florida. In that case, we'll say, well, if that's the case, that there are probably better financial tools out there for you. Second comment in this regard, what do the costs run? They're about like if you buy a house, so they're going to run about the same. And so again, none of us would buy a house if we figured we were going to move in a short period of time. In response to the closing costs, one of the things that the FHA did a couple of years ago was put in what they called the SAVER program. SAVER programs do not require an upfront mortgage insurance premium. So that can cut the closing cost about in half. You get about 20% less proceeds, but you can substantially cut down on your closing costs. And this indeed fits a lot of folks, because a lot of people say to us, I don't need a $200,000 credit line. If I can get a $140,000 credit line, that's going to last me, and I'll save on my closing costs. One other comment on this is particularly when we're dealing with folks that are having financial issues, we always tell them, take a look at the cost vis-a-vis what they're paying on their credit cards, on their subprime loans, that type of thing. So looking at the expenses on a reverse mortgage, they need to be looked at in comparison to what other alternatives may be out there.
All right, the reverse mortgage, the first lien, the existing first lien must be discharged, as this says. And often this is what we are trying to do. We are in a foreclosure situation on the first lien, and we're attempting to resolve that matter. Short pays are allowed, so that what we're often doing, whether we're working with housing counselors or the bank's attorney, is we're trying to get a short pay, and we'll talk about that later, so that we can discharge that first lien. And depending on what is going on with the first lien, whether it's been predatory or whether the size of that lien, we may need to negotiate that in order to be able to close on the reverse, as subordination is not allowed. Second liens can be resubordinated. Also, the property taxes and insurance, just like a regular mortgage closing, has to be current, but you can do that at the closing, and it can be part of the closing costs.
I have a couple of comments here I'd like to add. This is where the folks that are on this call can really be creative. Always the goal here is to, in the end, is to make sure that the senior homeowner is okay. And we've done a lot of, I say creative things. It's things a little bit out of the ordinary. We've pushed for subordinations, and we've had good success in that area. One of the things that Donna asked that I comment on, how long do these take? And she's indicated on her slide here the short pays are allowed. What we do with our investors is we can go out and we can get loan approvals subject to cash to close. So we have to pay off a $100,000 mortgage and we only have $80,000 in proceeds. We can still get an approval. We just have to prove to the FHA prior to closing how we're going to cover that remaining $20,000. in that example. That ability to get conditional approvals like that means that we can do these from our end pretty quick. 4 weeks, 5 weeks, we can have an approval subject to cash requirements.
And I would just like to comment that getting that approval is often important for the lawyers out there if we're negotiating with the bank. If I can say, look, I'm going to be able to get this reverse, and you are going to get maybe not all of the money that the bank is owed, but that this is going to happen. It can happen quickly. You'll be done. Retire your mortgage. That often is the push we need in order to get a write-down on the existing first lien.
If I can add, it's in terms of setting, this is Becky, in terms of setting expectations for your homeowner, sometimes these deals can go through very, very quickly, which is fantastic. Other times, these deals, in our office, we had one deal, I think it took, 2 years to get it done. So setting expectations, reasonable expectations for your client is critical. Many of the homeowners, as you know, want this to be over so that they can move on with their life and get out of, typically, in our cases, they're in foreclosure. Setting it clearly that this is going to take some time and all of the steps that are involved, it's a critical component.
Yes, if I say 4 to 6 weeks, again, I'm talking about a conditional commitment. Right. My job is pretty mechanical on the reverse mortgage side. The tough part is when you start talking to the lender if we're dealing with the short pay.
There's one question, there's a second one. There's a question here about heirs, what happens when the homeowner passes on, right? So if the heirs turn the home over, I'm not quite sure I understand, turn over the lender by using a deed in lieu, if there was equity left in the home, would the estate still receive the equity?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then the next question is if a second lien is resubordinated, is the amount of the second lien subtracted from the available equity? If not, why would a second lien agreement to a reverse, a HECM, that could eat up all the equity?
Yeah. My first comment is, in all the years I've been doing this, nobody's ever asked a question quite that way. So that's an interesting question. The answer is, though, it would not impact the proceeds. Okay, as long as it's subordinated, that the amount of proceeds available from the HECM would remain unchanged.
Okay.
And I will comment that the reverse mortgages that we've done where we've had seconds, we've actually ended up negotiating with the second as to a payment, and we've tried to get rid of it with the reverse, and we've been successful in that, and that's for just the reason you comment on. Why would they want to be subordinated? So that's something to think about, and them getting cents on the dollar, even a low amount has worked for us, and we've been able to come out of the case with just the reverse, which is the optimum.
Another question about how the mechanics of this. Are there VA reverse mortgages or USDA Rural Housing Services reverse mortgages or just FHA reverse mortgages?
Just FHA reverse mortgages. There's been on at least 2 occasions, there's been legislation introduced in Congress to extend it to include a particular reverse mortgage for veterans. It's never gone far, never gotten any legs, and we don't anticipate that it will in the future.
The next on judgments, very similar to the previous page, judgment liens obviously must be satisfied or subordinated. And in fact, I don't know, Dave, in your experience, but in my experience with reverse, we've always worked on getting rid of the judgment liens before closing. The money judgments do not need to be satisfied, but federal debts must be, and this is IRS. I have had on title searches student loans come up from many years ago, trade school loans that were part of a student loan, and these must not be delinquent. If they are delinquent, you're going to have a problem closing, and it's going to be delaying the process. So you can have an approved repayment plan, but you must make sure that you're not in default. So one of the things that we do prior to applying for the reverse is obviously going through a very detailed counseling session with our clients as to all debts that may or may not be out there. And we try to uncover and investigate first what may pop up on the title search and on any other judgment searches.
Bankruptcies. Satisfied bankruptcy is not an issue, not a problem, does not disqualify the homeowner. You can finish up a Chapter 7 bankruptcy as part of the reverse mortgage closing, and we've done that on a number of occasions. The third bullet there, an active 13 must receive court approval where the 13 remains in place. We've done that. That is difficult. The bankruptcy attorneys tend to make it very onerous to accomplish that. Nonetheless, it can be accomplished with the cooperation of the court. This is particularly addressed to some of the senior service agencies here. We've kind of talked about the difficult situation, and yet the overwhelming number of reverse mortgages we do are folks that are middle-class folks, live in their home, and they just want to supplement their present financial situation. So a lot of our clients set up lines of credit. They simply draw upon the money as they need it, or they're getting Social Security and they set up an automatic monthly draw from their reverse mortgage and, to supplement, again, their retirement benefit. They have immediate needs. They can take part of it as a lump sum. But and typically when, in our non-distress cases, we do some type of combination there. And so that's really the essence of what when the program came to be, what they had in mind. Although we've extended its cover people of all types of financial means.
Okay, who would not be a good candidate? And we spend a lot of time on this. So the first one is those who may not remain in the home, because as we've said earlier, this is really about keeping a senior in their community and in their home long term. If I have someone who I know is likely to move, either they're going to go down to their daughter's house down south, or maybe their health is very precarious and the likelihood of them entering an assisted living or a nursing home is high, then this would not be a good option, because as one of the triggering events, you must live in the home as your primary residence. Now, a short-term stay in a nursing home or even an assisted living or rehab is not going to be a trigger. But if I have someone who I really know is not going to be able to remain in the community due to their health, this would not be a good option for them. Those who are unable to meet their household expenses. So this really does mean that you have to sit down and go through those monthly expenses. In New York, we go through every, bill, how much is the oil going to be? How much is your property taxes? Do you have other outstanding obligations? And we really have to determine what it's going to cost a month. And when we run those numbers, sometimes, especially if there is a single individual, they've lost their spouse, the numbers don't work. And then we have to talk about a different option, unless, unless you can bring up the person's income some other way. Those who wish to give their equity to their heirs also would not be a good, all of their equity, because as we mentioned earlier, if there's some equity, your heirs can obtain. But if you need all the equity, and this generally I see this with individuals who have disabled adult children. I have a number of clients who have been taking care of their children their whole lives. They've lived with them. They need all of that money when they're gone in order that that disabled child has enough to sustain them throughout the remainder of their lives. So again, that is not the best option, a reverse. Obviously, in most cases, those who already have mortgages that are much greater than they would get on the reverse, because again, you're not going to be able to meet the obligations of the first lien, and that will be a problem. And spouses who are not yet 62, if you have a spouse, and we're going to talk about this later, sometimes there are cases where you have one person who's 62 and one who's 59, and it may work. But this is an area that really has to be explored on all levels. If, generally speaking, if I have someone who's 62 and someone in their 50s, we may not recommend this, especially if the 62-year-old may be in poor health. Because, again, you have to be 62 in order to be eligible for the reverse. And if the 62-year-old passes away or moves, the 59-year-old may find themselves with their loan called in. So the next.
Could we answer it now? If someone decides to make monthly, to take the monthly payments option, how is that handled? For example, does the closing costs and PMI, which I think you addressed that there is no PMI, right?
Well, it depends on the program, right?
True, yeah. True. And PMI gets paid first, and what is left, does it go to interest? Let me read this one more time. I'm sorry. If someone decides to make monthly payments, how is that handled? For example, does the closing costs and PMI get paid first, and what is left goes to the interest? Okay,
so when you say make monthly payments, so they're making payments on the loan, not receiving payments.
Yeah, I think
okay.
So.
All right. So somebody's making a repayment. That repayment is credited directly to the loan balance. So if the balance was $100,000 and they made a $1,000 repayment, when they got their next monthly statement, they'd see that loan balance go down to $99,000. Now, that being said, when that payment is received, each month the cost of the loan, so the interest has been added to the loan balance. So the cost gets added to the loan balance, so if a payment is made, the payment is credited directly to the loan balance. So there is a separate interest bucket accumulating, but for the client, when they get their monthly statement, they're going to see any payments they made being directly credited against the loan balance. I probably didn't answer that too clearly. Should I do that again, or?
I think what they're trying to figure out is it similar to a fully amortizing loan? How does that work? How does the payment get applied? Is there a?
Oh, I see. Okay, sure. So if your interest charges were $80 for the month and you made a $100 repayment, the first $80 would go into the interest bucket, and the next $20 would go in against the principal. But again, you're going to see that the whole $100 is going to be shown on your monthly statement in the as a reduction in the principal balance, because the charges have been added to the principal balance each month.
And in addition, if there's PMI,
yes,
that would also get credited to the PMI first?
Yeah, when we say PMI, the mortgage insurance, the MI piece, it's an FHA.
Okay. The next question is going to get addressed through the examples, but the question for you to be aware of is, if a mortgage company accepts a short sale to satisfy a mortgage in foreclosure, will they accept a short payment to satisfy a, will they accept a short payment to satisfy a mortgage in foreclosure if the funds from the reverse mortgage are not sufficient to satisfy the deficiency without additional cash payment? That will get addressed in the samples, but if you can just keep that in mind.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is the role of the Housing Counseling Agency or the legal services, the partner agency. And it's very clear that if you're dealing with a number of parties, including a foreclosing bank, you're dealing with the reverse mortgage company and your client, there needs to be a point person and who needs to stay on top of all of these balls that are in the air. It's a collaborative effort. We have found the reverse mortgage companies to be really a partner to tell us exactly what they need and what are the problems they foresee. Also, this usually takes more than one counseling session with our clients. This is an ongoing communication as I think Becky was saying earlier, it's great 4 to 6 weeks if we can get some sort of status from the reverse mortgage company, but to close, from the time we start this to closing, we do find can be, depending on what comes up in title searches and judgments and what else is happening with your client, may take longer. And so it requires a great deal of effort to collect the information and documents and to communicate with the client about the expectations and assist them. Because this is not something that people generally have had experience with. They may have had experience with mortgages, both good and bad. They may have had experience with loans. This is slightly different, and they may also have a pending foreclosure going on, and that is going to put added stress. So again, the role of everyone communicating is the most important. And sometimes we've even brought, and this depends on the bank, the lenders, as well as the reverse mortgage company, we've had communication with all of us on the same line, because sometimes the lenders talking to one another can quickly resolve an issue that for some reason we're not able to get through. So just keep that in mind. But you have to work. We work very closely with all of these entities, and it takes some time. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying.
What we need from a reverse mortgage standpoint, the typical case for us starts, someone will give us a call and say they might have a prospective client, and we just ask them really 4 questions. What are we looking to accomplish? How old are the people? Do we have an idea of the property value? But if we don't have an idea of the property value, if they can even give us an address, we can typically take a pretty good estimate, and we need some idea of the liens. That's all the information I need to be able to come back in like 15 minutes and give you a rough idea of what might be available in terms of proceeds. Are there more questions there?
There's one more. How does the interest rate for reverse mortgage compare to regular mortgage rates? Also, if the property was a refinance within the past year, are you eligible to get a reverse mortgage?
Okay. I'll take the second one first. Yes, you are, even if it's been refied in the last couple years. In terms of the interest rates, there's 2 types of options. The fixed rate is out there at right around 5% at the moment. The adjustable rates are in the 3% range. So very similar to what you see in the forward mortgage business.
And I would also add, Dave, right there, there is a cap on what can be borrowed. Right, it's 625.
Yeah, 625, 5, and when say the cap, that property value cap. So in doing the calculations, you had a property that's worth $800,000. For calculating your proceeds, they would use the 625 cap. Good so far here. We have 4 examples of cases we've done. I'm going to do these in about a minute because the facts aren't so much important as why we picked these. We want to show you the flexibility of the program. In the first example, this is, if there's such a thing as a typical case we've had, this is it. The lady was 79 years old. She was delinquent on a $100,000 mortgage. Her mortgage payment was most of her monthly income. What we did was we were able to generate about 3/4 of the money that she needed to pay off the mortgage from a reverse mortgage. And then the legal aid folks were able to negotiate a short pay for the difference, and we retired that loan, and she was all set the rest of her life without a mortgage payment. It was pretty straightforward. That's, again, the example of the case we've run across the most.
And I would just note in this example, Dave, that you mentioned that there was a weatherization grant, and most most of the time that I've done reverse, there's been some repairs that have been necessary because my clients have lived on a fixed income, and so maybe over the last 10 years they've not been able to make repairs. But generally speaking, we've been able to find a program, whether it's weatherization, something from here down in New York, Department for the Aging, that will help us to make those repairs so that we don't have to worry about those funds.
Yeah, that's a perfect example when we talk about a collaboration. because when we run into, I agree with Donna, with those are the situations we run into, and we immediately start looking around to see if we can partner with somebody to come up with paying for a new roof or new windows or whatever it may be.
Perhaps now with this example we can address that one question
Sure.
I mentioned earlier. So let me read it again. If a mortgage company accepts a short sale to satisfy a mortgage in foreclosure, will they accept a short payment to satisfy a mortgage in foreclosure if the funds from the reverse mortgage are not sufficient to satisfy deficiency without additional cash payment?
You want to? Yeah.
Do you want just
Sure. I mean, that's the $64,000 question. The holder of that existing first mortgage, they don't care what new financing is coming along. They just care about how much money they're going to get. They cannot enter a deficiency judgment. They have to agree to discharge.
And I will say that this is where we've found that the settlement conferences in Supreme can often be helpful. If we can get the court on board and to try to talk the bank and explain why this in the long run is in their interest, obviously.
I would say on the negotiating side of things, depending upon the bank or lender, they may or may not have ever heard of the concept of a short pay, or what they call sometimes is a short refinance. Sometimes, like PHH right now, we're struggling to get somebody to recognize what that even is. They think it's a short sale, and it's not. So just be aware of that, that sometimes it takes the most time, just finding somebody within the bank to have the conversation with you.
I want to make sure we have time for Donna to do the legal cases, so these next couple I'm just going to go very quickly. We mentioned the second one, a short pay we accomplished through Chase. The reason we mentioned this is that the original loan from AmeriQuest was judged to be a predatory loan, and that gave the legal folks a lot of leverage to negotiate and make the transaction happen. And we just point out that's something you might look for people that are in trouble. The third one was an example. This is an interesting one. This is an example where a title transfer took place. He was 64. She was like 60, I think, and they were getting divorced. And she said, I have no interest in the house. All I want is my share of the money. I'll be more than happy to deed the house to my husband in return for getting the cash that I have coming to me. So the title transfer made perfect sense. She got her money, he got the house, everybody was happy, and they finished their divorce. So the point is, title transfers are not inherently evil. Sometimes they make a great deal of sense. And the last example, we would actually, Donna kind of touched on this. This is an example. The reason this is a loan in the Bronx, and what I liked about this transaction was everybody got involved. Legal Aid did a great job of dealing with the lenders. We came up with most of the reverse mortgage money. The family helped out a lot, and there was a New York Times grant that put us over the top to finish the transaction. So we do a lot of this type of collaboration.
And
I'm going to talk and get to Donna now.
Okay, I would just want to say also for those folks down in New York, and I assume there's similar stuff in upstate, but down in New York, don't forget charities. Don't forget, like JASA will do small loans, Catholic charities. You really have to review what's out there, but to piece it all together. But there are grants out there.
Donna, does the New York Times grant still exist?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it goes through different kind of configurations, but New York Times Neediest still exists. The one you're talking about, I think, is no longer in, probably the one that was done in the Bronx. But New York Times Neediest cases, you can still get money from that. And if anyone has a question about those funds and grants, my contact info is on the back. The next thing, the closing costs. Obviously, this is no different than when you close on a regular mortgage with your client. You've got to examine the GFE, the good faith, and really look at those closing costs, because this is where, unlike Dave's company, we have seen that recently there's been popped up, just like there was in the predatory loans for the forward mortgages, that we've found that there's been all kinds of scams with reverse, where they're not really reverse mortgage companies. They're the terms are terrible, and we've had to actually step in and report some to the AG. So you want to look at those closing costs. They are governed by RESPA. They're governed by the FHA. There are mandated itemizing fees. Obviously, any increase or additional fees have to meet this definition of valid change circumstances. And we have had this happen where there's been a higher appraised value because it took a while for us to gather all the documents together to make the reverse work. And when we go to do it, then there's been a change in the appraised value. The provider may charge an origination fee, and I will just note that if you go to the rules, the FHA rules, there are caps on these fees. I think currently there's a $6,000 cap, but even beyond the $6,000 cap, it is related to the amount that the amount of the reverse mortgage. So look at those. Anything under less than $125,000 has a flat fee, and then after that there's percentages. The providers may not charge a shared equity or shared appreciation. This was going on a number of years ago, and there have been some problems with this. You'll see this in the newspaper, but those are not allowed. Although allowed, there are many companies where the reverse mortgage provider is not accessing servicing fees. They are allowed to access a small amount. I think it's $30 and $35. You can look again up those fees, but I think you're better off, especially with our clients who are on very, very fixed incomes, to find someone who's not assessing servicing fees.
There's a question I think that fits well with this slide. So the question is, our client got a reverse mortgage to pay off her prior mortgage on which she owed approximately $233,000. Although that was the only sum paid out on her behalf, and she does not receive any ongoing payments from the reverse mortgage lender, why does the HECM provide for a loan in the amount of $487,000?
Okay. There's no lender discretion in how much you get from a reverse mortgage, and that was on purpose. They didn't want folks to always be out there saying, gee, can I get a good deal by going down the street? In essence, what the FHA said, there's going to be one deal, all right? Tell us the age, pick a property, a program, and we'll appraise the property, plug it into a formula that's going to produce an answer, okay? So if she's approved for a lot more than what she needs, that's fine. It just sits out there, is unused but available credit. It's not costing her any money. It's just like having a credit card with no balance on it. One other thing on that, and again, that goes back to the Saver program. For people like that, because a lot of people say, I don't need $487,000, that's what the Saver program was designed for. Less proceeds made available for lower costs.
Is there a quick formula that can be used to estimate reverse mortgage amount available to a homeowner?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way to do it, the real quick formula, is to say that at 62, they're eligible for about half the value of the property, and if you take them up to, say, age 90, where they'd be about 3/4 of the value. That's a real quick formula. Now, the last slide you're going to see in here, we're going to talk about if you provide me like 3 variables, I actually plug it into the exact formula for you. But use the half quarters.
And I will say we've also, the reverse mortgage companies we've dealt with are pretty quick about, if you get on the phone, about plugging it into a reverse mortgage calculator and telling you this is what it looks like, you know, so that we know whether we're anywhere in the ballpark or not. These are prohibitions. The FHA specifically prohibits the payment of a referral fee to an estate planning firm or an elder law firm or other third parties. And this came about, I know, I had not seen this in New York, but I think it was reported in the papers last year, I remember, out west and maybe down south, that this was a problem, and estate planning firms, financial firms were being, they were getting this referral fee was appearing on the costs, and that's prohibited. Of course, if your client does go to an elder law attorney and they do set up, you know, a tribe, they set up certain things for them, of course they're entitled to be compensated. But the referral fee is prohibited. And again, here we give you the directory of lenders that is FHA approved. So hopefully that's helpful. Also, this was again reported in the papers about a year ago, maybe a little longer, that companies, providers were offering other financial products such as these annuities, and that has now also been prohibited. I think they're trying to, close this down and make sure that really what's happening is the reverse, and you're subordinating what you need to subordinate, and you're getting the senior to be stabilized and hopefully in their home and not robbing the equity. Okay, this is I've listed these at the end here. These are 2 class actions that are currently going on and that may affect, one more than the other, that may affect your clients. The first one is the Bennett case, which is currently pending down in D.C. And what this is about is that, as Dave and I have said throughout this, is that the borrower must be age 62. And what happened is there is a difference between what is in the statute for reverse mortgages that Congress promulgated and what is and passed and what is in the regulations. And this is what's caused the confusion and the issue. In the statute, it says that a loan can be called in only upon triggering events. And one of those triggering events is that the homeowner is no longer residing in the home as their primary residence, and that could be due to death or they may have moved. They defined homeowner as the borrower homeowner, whoever is on the title, as well as their spouse. So that included people who were under the age of 62. At least that's what the plaintiffs in this case has said. And actually, I had a case that we filed in the Eastern District a number of years ago, and that's what I said, because the statute was straightforward as to its definition. However, in the regulations and in the contracts, and I'm sure Dave can attest to this, that in the contracts, the mortgage contracts, they define it as the borrower and who is on the title, and they do not include the spouse. So that when somebody dies, if a spouse age 62 dies, and that's what happened in the Bennett case. There was a spouse age 62. The husband was under that age. I think he was around 59, maybe 60. And a month later, the borrowing spouse, the one on the title, passed away, and the bank called in the loan. What happened is this litigation was then brought. HUD was sued. Most recently, there was a decision out of the appellate court. The lower court had found that HUD could not be sued, and it went up to the appellate court. And the appellate court found, it's called standing, found that in fact there was standing to sue for Mr. Bennett to sue HUD. The reason I bring that up is because it's in that decision, which is here and which I list, which was issued in January 2013, the appellate court stated as an aside they did not understand why HUD wasn't correcting this problem and why they thought that they did not have to follow the statute that said that it included spouses. And the court said in dicta, right, as an aside, that they could simply say that the non-borrowing spouse at the time that the application is submitted or something to that extent. So they were trying to let the parties know maybe that was a way to resolve it. It has now that the circuit found standing, it has gone back down to the D.C. Circuit, and this will have to be resolved because I am also aware that, and I'm sure Dave can talk to it, that the reverse mortgage companies are concerned that if you had a individual who borrowed and they were 62 and they married a 20-year-old, that this could present a problem. And that is what the litigation is about, and those are the issues that are currently being challenged. And that, again, is a class action. Do you want to say anything about that, Dave, before I move on?
No, I think that that's a good summary, Donna, of where we are on that one.
Okay. But note, I do want to say that since this isn't resolved and it is very clearly being litigated, that today I would be very cautious about what you did if you had a 59-year-old. I think that is a long conversation you have to have with your couple about what the risks are. One, if you leave it as is, if you take, because the reverse mortgage company is going to advise you in order to close that you must only have individuals 62 and older on that title, which means taking off the 59-year-old. And so you really have to have a conversation about the risks that may be involved.
Donna, one of the questions that was asked a bit earlier was specifically around this issue. And so my question for you is whether or not this person can contact you to flesh out some of those issues.
Oh, sure, sure. And also, absolutely. And also I have found, because when I've had this issue, I've contacted counsel on the Bennett case, and they've been very, very helpful about how they see this litigation going and what the risks are. So absolutely contact me.
Okay.
On the Chandler case out of California, I think that this is right, Dave. I think we probably think this is less of an issue going forward. But what it was that when the repayment of the loan was becoming due, the right of the heirs, it was that once you had a deceased individual, the heirs would be entitled to the loan that would be called in would either be the lesser of the loan balance, or if you were going to sell or transfer, 95% of the appraised value. And what happened in 2008 was, and that's what this FHA mortgage letter here was, it sort of sent that into a tailspin as to whether or not that was still true and what was being called in, whether it really was the lesser of the loan balance or 95% of the appraised value. Since there was this lawsuit was filed in 2011, since there was so much confusion and people were actually being foreclosed on for the entire loan balance, regardless of what it was, now, as we said earlier, they wouldn't be entitled to have to pay all of that loan balance if it was more than the value of the home, but they may have been losing equity. And FHA has since, in the subsequent letter, 2011-16, it has rescinded that 28 letter, and currently this piece of litigation, as far as I could tell as of this morning, was going to mediation, and I think they were trying to settle it in the federal court. Wells Fargo had been sued by Chandler because they were still calling in the loan balance and not allowing for the 95% of the appraised value. But I think that this issue will be resolved, and I assume that given the FHA said they may later, after they set out this letter in 2011, they say they may give further direction later on. But otherwise, they were telling people to look at the regulations.
We're right at the 1 hour mark, so we're going to finish up here. I hope we haven't overloaded. We covered a lot of material relatively quick here. You'll see in these last two slides contact information for myself and for Donna. I'll give you just a second thing. If you contact me by toll-free number or by telephone, that's fine. I'm going to ask you just 3 or 4 questions to give you an initial screening and tell you what might be possible on a reverse mortgage. We travel the state doing this. We meet our clients in person, regardless of where they are in the state. And you can also call me anonymously. So a lot of times people want to have their clients call us. That's fine. They don't have to even identify themselves if they just want to get basic information about what might be possible. With that, I appreciate everybody who's attended, and I'll turn this back over to Becky and Donna.
I just have one question. I think it's, if a home was destroyed by a natural disaster, how would that impact the HECM loan?
Sure. The FHA or loan servicer is named as a lost payee, just like on a regular forward mortgage. If the house is totally destroyed, 100% destroyed, and it cannot be rebuilt, the FHA would say, okay, take the insurance proceeds and repay the loan. If we have damage to the property, the FHA loan servicer and the homeowner would get together and decide what they want to do. If they want the house rebuilt, that would be fine with the FHA, and the servicer would monitor the repair.
Donna, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think that covers it.
Great. I'd like to thank everybody again. Dave and Donna, thank you so much. I think this has been a fantastic presentation. Thankfully, Dave and Donna are also offering their services for everyone on the call if you have questions along the way. And I appreciate everybody's time. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.